A few weeks ago, I was on a speaking tour around the States, and I was waiting in Houston for a flight to Philadelphia. And a man next to me, big tattooed guy, starts talking to me. He asked where I was going. I said I was going to Philly. There was a scholar in residence with Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. I asked him where he was going. He said, well, I'm going to Bethlehem. I said, oh, that's really cool, because I live right near Bethlehem. And he said, really, where do you live? And I said, Efrat. And he said, oh, I never heard of it. And I said, well, that's because I live near the real Bethlehem. You know, there's Shiloh, Kentucky, and Jericho, New York, and Bethel's everywhere, and Hebron's everywhere. And I live near the real Bethlehem. And that sense of not occupation, but liberation is very much in the minds of, I think, many Israelis, was in 1967. Where I live, and we mentioned Memorial Day, which just happened a couple of days ago, I went to the cemetery in Kfar Etzion with one of my children, who's now a sergeant in the IDF. And the cemetery in Kfar Etzion is actually why there is Memorial Day in Israel the day before Yom HaTzmaut. The day before Ben Gurion declares a state on May 14th, well, on May 13th, 1948, is when Kfar Etzion falls. There were Jews living in that area, and after they surrendered to the Jordanians, they were massacred. 240 Jews were killed there. And that became so important in the Israeli mind that that actually is the day that is Memorial Day for the entire country, is the day that Gush Etzion fell in 1948. So far from it being just like coming into land and the holy places, there are people in Israel in 1967 whose fathers had been killed, who had been raised in these areas, and this is a terrible term, but unfortunately it holds, ethnically cleansed in these areas. So while Arabs are left in Israel after the war and get Israeli citizenship, all Jews are thrown out of Judea and Samaria. And for 19 years, the place is Judenrein. And so the Jews, there are many Jews, myself included, who feel that we have come home. When I go to Italy and I stand under the Arch of Titus and you see what was taken out from the temple, and the tour guide there says to me, so where do you live? And I say, well, I live in Judea. And I cry, because against all odds, we have come home. We're the indigenous population. That's where Jew comes from. So and in 1967, many, many Israelis felt like that. There was a sense of awe. There was a sense of the miracle. In West Point at Military Academy, they do not study the Six-Day War because nobody can make heads or tails of it on a military sense. So there was that feeling, which has faded over the last 50 years, of being part of, you want to call it a miracle, you want to call it something greater than we were. And of course, being saved from annihilation at the time didn't hurt either.